Hello, my name is Mark Reifmerath. I'm the CEO of Tech, and welcome to another great episode of Culture Starts With You, where we talk about all things culture and core values. Today, we've got an amazing guest, Tyler Kelly. He's the president of Basis, formerly known as Centro, and he's going to be awesome. I'm super excited for this conversation. So he's been with Basis for 17 years. He was employee number 4. So he's been there virtually from the beginning. They have over 1,000 team members today. They wrote their manifesto, Sean, their founder, did before they started, basically, and it still survives today. We're going to talk about that, which I think is awesome. Tyler oversees a team of roughly 150 sales professionals, as well as 300 service techs. So he's got a big team. Plus, the company is around 1,000 team members, and he oversees, obviously, that whole team. So that's a big company. Culture and core values is core to what he sees as their success, both in the past and in the future. We're going to dive into that and talk about it a ton today. He's been in the game a long time. He used to sell magazine ads for brands like Sports Illustrated. So he's seen a lot evolve and change in his history. He's also excited about data and AI and automation for the marketing industry. So I'm excited to jump into this. Let's go. It's going to be a fun conversation, and let's get it started. Tyler, thank you again for being on Culture Starts With You, a podcast where we talk all about culture and core values and where we debate it and really dig into it. I'm really excited to get into this with you today. So just as a little bit of a warm-up question, I always like to ask this. This is something I ask in every interview that I'm a part of for somebody on our team. So when you wake up in the morning and you walk to your desk, what would be the walk-up or entrance song playing in your head every morning?
It's a great question. I've always said I think my walk-up song would always be "Eye of the Tiger." I don't know why that pops into my head, but that's definitely the one that strikes it. And so, yeah, I think, trying to seize the day, get a little excited, and try to attack like the eye of the tiger. I mean, I think that's where my head's at.
Love it. That's a common one. That's a good one. It's an easy pump up one to get you going. Mine is maybe a little bit more mellow. It's Lovely Day. It just kind of walks you into it. Now, I would also say it would change based on what I'm going to have to attack that day. I might go with Eye of the Tiger if I had a little more bigger problems to solve.
Who sings Lovely Day?
I knew you were going to ask me that, and it's just on the tip of my tongue, but I'm blanking, so buzzkill for that one. Sorry. All right. I love it, though. Okay, so you're in YPO, Young Presidents Organization, as am I. That's one of the reasons we met, actually, as well as you're a great partner of Techs. But tell us a little bit about that journey. How did you get introduced to YPO, and what's your experience been like?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to meet some really great guys through my country club, actually. And they were in YPO, North Texas, which is the chapter I'm in. And they just spoke so fondly of it that, this was where they've made some of their greatest friends. They've also grown as individuals. And it was a lot more than just a social club. It was definitely more of a, how do you become a better leader? How do you become a better person? And how do you become a better parent? And I loved those aspects of it. So I asked one of them to sponsor me. They did. Took me a while. It took me almost 2 years to get in, just because of some of the logistics of my CEO. I'm the president of Basis Technologies, but there is a CEO founder that was also a part of YPO, and I also saw his journey, and it made him a better leader. We use a lot of aspects of YPO in our day-to-day working world. We actually do check-ins. We make sure that everyone is kind of present before we kick off anything, and that was a lot through the YPO learnings. And so it took, like I said, 2 years. Now I've been in it for 3 years. Love my forum, love my chapter. We actually have a chapter retreat, which I'm actually excited about. It's mandatory for all 82 members, and we're going to go to Broken Bow, Oklahoma in a couple weeks. And I think it's going to be a great way just to meet people. Because sadly, when I joined YPO, the pandemic hit. And so I've not had probably the full experience yet, but I think this year is going to be the year.
That's great. And I think it's important for whether you're in YP or not, just understanding the power of having peers around you to, especially in leadership positions, you've got to have a sounding board, and it's lonely at the top. That you hear about that and you read about it, but until you get there, you don't realize that. And YPO is just such a great outlet for that.
Yeah,
so I always encourage people to get in something like that.
I was going to say, in your experience, right? Do you spend more time talking about business or personal?
I would say it varies on kind of the season of life and just even the time of year and what's going on. I mean, sometimes, because you're hitting on a great point. If as a leader you have a personal problem, there's a noise factor that can influence how we lead, and so this is such a great way to solve it. I mean, for me personally, it's probably been more business. With I'd say it's 75-25, but you have other forum mates who are maybe heavier on the personal side because of some stuff that's going on. But I think that blend is actually really good in a forum of when you have, I think some forums kind of become only one category. And that's not necessarily as healthy. It's intended to touch all aspects. So I enjoy all of them. And what I always find is you learn so much from other people's experiences. Whether I think I needed to hear that right now or not, you file that away, and I found that to be, I pull on it in the future quite often.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I would actually say we probably spend more time on personal, just because it's a safe place, and I think that's what you get out of it too. The fact that you have to be very confidential, and you can be your true authentic self, and you realize that hey, we're all screwed up. So even though we're at the top, we still have a lot of issues. So It's always good to get out.
I always say we all put our pants on the same way, right? So
exactly.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for that. I think again, finding that peer group, just a trusted room, kind of your personal board. That's another way I've always looked at it. It's a personal board, and I'm coming up on 4 years. We joined about the same time, so I've always enjoyed kind of paralleling our experiences to see where we're at and everything. So thanks for sharing that. All right, so let's dig into your role at Basis. You've been there a long time, and like I said, this is all about culture and core values. So I'd love to just, you were team member or employee number 4, correct?
Yeah.
So you've seen some change. You're like me. You're there on the ground. So did you define culture in the beginning? Did you have core values, or was something that evolved over time? Talk about that journey.
Yeah, so this is where I will give a ton of credit to our founder and CEO, Sean Rieksacker. He actually created a manifesto, and he created it prior to me even joining. So the idea of culture and treating employees the right way out of the gates was always his mindset. And he's always been, if we can change the corporate culture to be more employee focused and focus on them, they will give so much more back to us. And it's definitely lasted the test of time. And that manifesto, which we still have on our website today, which really talks about, like I said, treating the employee the right way, giving back, all those pieces, has not changed, and it's made us who we are. And over that time, I've been with Basis for 17 years. So it's definitely changed quite a bit, right? If you think just about our industry, it changes probably 2 to 3 times a year, I feel like. And we've had to maneuver through that. And I remember we hired consultants probably 10 years ago. And they were like, your culture is so strong that we believe that if you actually wanted to go start a cruise ship line, you guys could go do it tomorrow. Because when you have that culture, people are all working together. And they're working towards that true vision and that mission that everybody feels is the right one. And I think that's what he's really done a great job encapsulating. He's pushed it down. And I do think culture starts at the top. If you have a bad person at the top, it's going to matriculate all the way down, and vice versa. When you have someone who's really focused on employees, it pushes down and people feel it. Now I'll say, I think it's in the last year, I should probably say it's the pandemic, it's become, it's interesting, right? Because I also think our manifesto can be weaponized. And, some aspects of it, there's nothing in our manifesto that says you don't have to work hard or there's work-life balance. But people always say, hey, well, if you put employees first, why are you guys wanting me to work so hard? And, we do think you need to work hard. And we do think that aspect is there. And granted, over the last 2 years, it's become harder. I think people are stressed. There's different economic issues. There's different world issues. There's a war going on in Russia. There's Black Lives Matter. How are we focusing on all those pieces and still trying to run a business, right? And I think that's what we're all trying to understand and achieve.
I love all that, and I couldn't agree more. I think I heard a leader recently say something about, the way that we led to get us to the pandemic, and then the way that we led in the pandemic. Neither one of those equations of leadership style get us beyond it. And so we all have to adapt and change now, because it's a new game. Everything's changed. And I think we're all kind of figuring it out as leaders. And so I've said to our leadership team, let's set the bar. Let's set the freaking bar. I don't know what that looks like, but that's what I'm challenging them with, and I've even said recently, like, we've been doing a good job of getting our teams together, whether they're in a market with an office or not. But I said, this is the new ping pong tables and beanbag chairs and everything. Like, we can't just have fun events. It's got to be more than that. I don't know what that is, but to me, that's the new beanbag chairs and ping pong tables in the office, or the kegerator. Like, we've got to push it to another level that it's not just connecting people. It's building deep bonds. And so this is the challenge that all of us face, because you're right. It's totally changed. And as leaders, I think we got to be honest. We're all figuring that out.
Well, we have a head of our DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and she came on board about a year ago. She's been amazing, and we had a conversation just the other day. She's like, "How was my first year?" And I said, "I think we've done a great job of reestablishing diversity and equity, but we're failing at inclusion." And so I think year two, how do we get inclusion back? To your point, Mark, right? Like, people aren't going back in, and they don't want to go back in.
Right.
Not that much. We did a survey where, 67% of our employees said they wanted to come in 2 to 3 days a week. Well, it turns out 3% want to come back in. So, now that we know those numbers, how do we readjust? But how do we create those inclusion events? How do we get people tighter? Because if we can't do that, then I'm fearful of culture being lost. And that would be a terrible thing, because we've done done a great job of trying to build that up. So that's, if you figure it out, Mark, please let me know. Because, we're still struggling with it too. We try to do, hey, we're doing a college, tailgate, happy hour, trying to do something to get people back in. But at the same time, I think, being together is something worthwhile, and having some team meetings, having, hey, we're just going to go in 1 to 2 days a week, but, there's a purpose behind it. Not just going in to go in, but, we're going to solve an issue. And I've said this a lot, where I think through the pandemic, we became a lot more, I think we're more productive, right? I think for the most part, people are getting more work done because you're not commuting, you're not having the side chats, and you get your stuff done. But we've lost creativity. And if you can set aside meetings to be creative and have everybody included and participating, I think we can get some of it back. But I have not figured it out yet.
Yes. No, I don't know that anybody has. And one of the filters I've been using is, for like office space rent, what's the ROI on your culture for those dollars? If you're doing so what is the ROI on a cultural perspective? And that's a hard thing to answer in every scenario, but just been challenging some of our expenses of, should those be reallocated to bringing the team together in person? We've done, every team is getting together this year, and we're probably 3/4 of the way through all teams getting together in person, and the feedback's been phenomenal. But there's a timer of when it's like, okay, I've got a 30-day high, a 60-day high. When does it start to dissipate? And so thinking in the future, what's the cadence if it's all teams, maybe cross-pollinating different teams together? But you're right, we don't have those happy collisions in the office where, hey, Tyler, what'd you do this weekend? You just told me what you did when we were talking before. That's great. That creates a talking point for us to pin on in the future. I learned a little bit more about you, and you learned a little bit about me, but we're missing those opportunities right now that we have to recreate in different ways.
Yeah, I agree completely. And that's the tough part, right? When you're managing P&L and you've got a board to answer to that definitely wants to see your EBITDA going up, how do you balance out the expense versus the experience? And, that's something that we're struggling with. We're in some long-term leases, so I'm hoping to shed some of those, because I do think if we can take those dollars, reallocate them towards experiences and inclusion, by cutting down our actual physical space, but still wanting people to come in, I think is the right blend as we move forward. But I agree with you. I don't know how many times. Is it once a quarter? Is it once a month? I don't know. I think every team might be different too. You have different, we have, 230 something people in our engineering department. And, I don't think they would want to get together, 4 or 5 times a year. On the flip side, our sales team would love to get together, weekly. So I think it also depends on the vibe, what you're trying to create and what you're trying to motivate within your organization without being too heavy-handed.
Yeah, I agree. There's a balance. And yeah, everybody has different needs. I think that's become very apparent to me is as a leader, you have to say it may be the same message, but you've got to say it, at least 7 to 10 different ways so everybody understands it and hears it. But recognition, everybody needs to be recognized differently. Some people love it publicly, some don't. The in person, we have, and I'm sure you do too with being in related fields, we have a ton of introverts. They don't necessarily appear to be introverts because in a meeting, they're very outgoing. But what you and I don't realize as extroverts is that's extremely draining for them and their battery just gets sucked dry. And so those in-person events can create a lot of anxiety and just really drain them. You and I need those to get energy. We gravitate towards any situation like that to give our batteries more power. And so it's taking all those things into account. And you've got over 800 team members, correct?
We're just over 1,000 now.
1,000 now. So, you've got 1,000 different versions of how people want to interact. And so these are just all the I think, modern day challenges of being a leader. And honestly, it's in some regards, an attack on our culture. Not necessarily our core values. I think the core values is easier to live, but our cultures, we have to redefine it. And again, what led us here, what got us here is not going to work for the next 10 years or who knows, maybe shorter, maybe longer, but we've got to reinvent that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Where I'm still struggling, which is also how do you cater or not cater to that really vocal 10%? Because you're going to have those people that don't want to get in the office. They have very strong opinions, but it might not be the mass of what people are thinking, but they have a very strong voice. And where we try to figure out is how do we balance those strong voices against what we believe the majority would actually like. And I don't know if you guys face that.
No, I agree. And that's, what are your filters in decision making? And one of the very first one is what's best for the team. So it may be one voice that you're hearing, but can it be what's best for the team? Is what they're asking for, is it truly what's best for the whole team? And oftentimes that filter works. We have 2, we put it through that, what's best for the team and what's best for the business. Ultimately, that's going to be what's best for our clients. And so we always say we're a team first company, but that is an easy attacking point too of, well, you say you're that, but you're not letting me do X.
Yeah.
Well, no, because that doesn't really make sense for the whole picture either. And so those are, I think, the unique times. And some of that too is, we are virtually all remote. We've got 165-ish people, probably, let's say maybe 40 of those have some cadence of coming into an office between all 5 offices. But that's not all in one place and not all at the same time. If you and I are coming into an office and we're talking with team members about these things, it's a different conversation. It's easier to get on the same page about it versus I'm at home, they're living in their world to some extent. It's easy to maybe get a little bit more separation. So I think, here's a great point is, as a leader, what has your cadence been for communicating to the whole team? Have you found a good pattern of how to kind of stay in front of them?
So we have a all hands call once a month, and we believe that's the right cadence at this point. It always happens faster. I'm like, wait, we've got another all hands call coming. But I do think the more communication, the better. I think in just every aspect of business. The more people are informed, the less they come up with their own ideas. And it's human nature that when there is a blank spot, you are going to fill it in with usually negative thoughts. So I'm amazed at some of the conspiracy theories I hear that we're doing as a corporation or as leadership or executive team is conspiring. I'm like, you've gone down some crazy paths. Like, we're trying to, work everybody to death because we're trying to, it's crazy. And so I think filling in those blank spaces for them makes people feel more comfortable and more aligned with where they're going as a team. So that's really our cadence on where we look at it.
Yeah, that's great. And I agree wholeheartedly with the filling in the blanks. So what I have started to say for any big announcements, it's way more important to say what it isn't than what it is. Because the what it is typically it's pretty concise. It's we're doing this and you say it. But what that doesn't mean is we're not doing layoffs. We're not doing and try because otherwise people, oh my gosh, so you're saying in the next 6 months we're probably gonna have layoffs. No, that's not what I said. That's not at all. In fact, it's the opposite of that. Like we're making this decision to hedge against that, and we think that this is the way that we grow versus shrink or have client attrition, whatever. And so it's been very important for us to say, here's what it is and here's what it isn't, and repeat that. And then we do a lot of the cascading messages. So as executive leadership, we'll say, here's what we're saying. We say that, and then you say the extended leadership team, here's what it is and what it isn't. And because it's important too that each leader has their flavor on it so that they know their team hears it. But you're spot on. The filling in the blanks is a great way of saying it, because that is, I think, a shift that I've noticed since the pandemic has hit too. I don't know if that's a symptom of just being at home in different places, but it's definitely a shift, and that's been a challenge as a leader. I know for me personally as well, in a big way.
Yeah, I think there's more pessimism than there is optimism out there in the world right now, which is not a great place to be. I'm a very optimistic person, so I'd like to think good things, but I think there is a lot of pessimism out there, and it's balancing that and making sure that people feel comfortable. What's been an interesting thing for us too is the political side. Not that I want to get into a big political debate, but when you're talking about inclusion, it's funny. We are a very liberal company. Leadership tends to be more on the left than the right. But we definitely have people on both sides. And what I found interesting is that the right is actually feeling more excluded, now. And you always think about, the rights, they always get their way. But like in corporations, sometimes that lean one direction, it can be difficult. And the idea of inclusion is to include everybody and all points of view and be open to everything. And so that's been an interesting one to try to harbor when you don't agree with someone politically or religiously or whatever it is. But that's what makes a good culture. That's what creates better ideas, better thinking. And so we got to embrace that.
Yeah. I agree with all that. That is a challenge as a leader. One of the beautiful things for us since COVID hit is we used to have this mentality. We still have this mentality. We didn't used to. It's always been our mentality. Hire the best person for the job. That's the simple filter. But it had this little asterisk in a market we have an office. Well, now it's everywhere. So if you're the best person, you live in Boston or you live in San Fran, I don't care. Even Dallas, that town down there, right? No matter where it is, that's totally cool. Best person for the job. And what I've said is, especially in marketing, what a beautiful thing. Now, I think diversity is amazing, and diversity of where you're at, the way you were raised, the way that you celebrated different holidays, that is all so powerful, because in marketing, I oftentimes think of the way that I want to be marketed to, and so do you. And when you have this team that's spread out and has, regardless of their background, it's different. Everybody's different. And so we need to lean on those backgrounds as marketers to a deliverable of multiple messages, so that we're hitting those audiences in the right way. And so I think we're continuing to get better at that and leaning into that. But for us, it's a beautiful kind of byproduct of COVID impacting us in a very positive way.
Yeah, no, I agree. Have you guys looked overseas at all? Have you guys moved international?
So starting to explore a little bit, and those conversations come up a lot of, okay, well, what about the time zone? So we've had some South America ones that it's like, well, sure, that's easy. Like they're still central, or they're still, they're within an easy range. Overseas it's been discussed, but not fully deployed, because there's some challenges with just the scheduling. But I am very intrigued by it and think that it's definitely something we need to explore further.
Yeah. It's a challenge, right? It's a challenge from compensation purpose, making sure you've got the right way to pay them, either going through consultants or actually opening up different, arms of your company within those countries. But I do think there is a lot of talent, and I think there's a lot within. We have offices in Mexico, Buenos Aires, Guatemala, and Colombia, and so within those, like, how are you operating? How are you communicating? Those are other aspects that people need to think about long term, because there's some really great talent. I would say that my biggest learning on it, though, is it hasn't saved us a ton of money. A lot of people are like, oh, you can get cheap labor. I wouldn't say it's cheap labor. I think it's good labor. And, I think if you approach it that way, and it's not just a cost cutting, but just a way to get better, I think you can do some really great things.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good way. And I agree there's tons of untapped talent pools for a lot of US-based companies. There's a lot of labor laws and stuff that complicate it, almost make it harder. But the thought I've said to our team is, I don't know that our clients care like they used to. That used to be a question of, do you outsource? Do you have, is everything, onshore basically? And that's not a question that even gets asked anymore. It's, are you going to do great work for us? They don't necessarily care is it secure? Are you going, they want that part. But other than that, I don't think they really care. So I think COVID also flattened the world again, even more than it was, and just removed some of those potential mind blocks that people had or perceptions they had with that style of working.
Yeah, I agree. I think, to your point, people just want the job done, and they want it done the most efficient way, which, not to bring it back to Basis, but I will for a second. But that's the idea of Basis, right? Is to create an automation platform that allows people to think bigger and get rid of some of that mundane work. If you think about what offshoring is, and that term, right, is really about kind of the low-level mundane work. Because what we're seeing within the marketing industry, I believe, is we're losing the young talent, right? We've heard of this great resignation. I don't really believe in the great resignation, because there's only 3.5% unemployment. So that means people are still working, they're just working in different areas. We're definitely seeing a exodus out of, I think, the agency and marketing field. And I do believe that's because we bring these kids in who are highly educated, and we have them focused on pacing reports, optimization reports, billing, and it's not very stimulating. And they got into advertising to create things and to be fun and think big. And we kind of suppress it because we need to. And to be honest, I think offshoring's been a help to that. But could we create a technology that takes away those aspects to actually allow people to do more at a younger, earlier stage, so we keep our talent? And it's that. I also think there's something with the compensation too. I don't think we pay as well as some of the other industries, which I think we're facing that as well. But for the most part, how do we get people thinking bigger? And I think there's offshoring, and I think there's technology, and we're focused on the technology.
Great points. And so what I've been thinking about this is, you're right. Like, how do you hedge the talent gaps that I think it's only going to get worse over the next several years, because our space isn't getting easier to work in. It's getting more complex. All the platforms are harder. Not saying the Basis, but Google and Facebook, and they're all creating new rules constantly. And so as an agency, we just want to own the strategy. That's the number one thing we want to be, really, really strong in. The button pushing and the lever pushing, that can be done by a lot of different talent pools. But what can't be done by a lot is the strategy and the insights and the learnings. And so really making sure we're positioning ourselves as an agency to be the best in those categories. I can't walk in and say, we're great at paid search because we push the buttons better and we pull the levers better than somebody else. At some point, everybody does that. It's what's the input of that to make sure that, I always brag that we're more sophisticated. We are operating at a different level than most agencies, but we've got to back that with really good strategists and smart, talented people. So you find that young talent, how are you bringing them from the farm team to the major league team as quickly as possible to keep them stimulated and growing and not wanting to go to corporate, the corporate side or whatever?
You're exactly right. And I think that's an amazing model. Keep that vision, please, because I do think that's the future. Now, the problem that we're all trying to solve is that, for the most part, when we hear agencies losing a client, it's not because of the strategy. It's because of the reporting. It's because of the little things that mean something, right? Because strategy is a strategy, which is great. But if you have 2 + 2 = 5 in a report, that's going to get caught. And how do you make sure that you've got the right quality in QA getting through to make sure that the clients are happy and they trust you? Because it comes down to trust.
You're very right. And that's something we pride ourselves on is we need to have great reporting. And it's not just don't read the numbers. What are the insights? What's that data telling you that we should be do more of or do less of? Fail fast mentality. And you're right. A lot of clients that are buying from agencies, that's their frustration point is, you may be getting a little lazy or just because the strategy everybody can agree on. This is the right strategy. But just because the strategy is right doesn't mean it'll still work. It's got to take everybody leaning in. So you're spot on. I think the agency space, there's a lot of consolidation happening. I'm sure you're seeing a ton of that as well. And there's just a pinch on the talent that's making it a little bit harder for everybody. I see this as an opportunity. I think that, the strong agencies can accelerate through that. And it also, though, takes a great culture and core values to do that. And I think people are more intrigued and interested in, like, when you're making an offer, money is a component, but man, the culture and core values. So I want to bring this back around to that for a minute and say, so when you guys are hiring, how are you using your culture to get, I'm sure you see a ton of amazing resumes that you're competing with Google, Facebook, some big names. How do you lure them your way with that culture?
I would say the number one thing is culture for us, right? In how we approach any new applicant or even existing, employees. I'm very lucky, when I look at the people I'm with, I work with a lot of people that have been here over a decade. And so I always get the question, why have you been there for 17 years? It's culture, first and foremost, right? The people I get to work with, having best friends at work is a major draw. And anytime I think anything differently or, oh, there's a new shiny company over here and they're wanting to hire me, I'm like, but I don't have my best friends, right? And if I get to work in that environment. And so we use that in talking to people. And the good part is that we're living it, right? If I just said it and I'd only been here for a year, probably falls on deaf ears. But the fact that I've been here, done it, and we have a lot of examples of it, I think is what really draws them in. So it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it. And I think that's what we really use and say, hey, this is what here's the manifesto. It's on our website. I think we have well over 100 that have been here over 5+ years. And, just having that scale, people are like, wow, you guys must really live it. And I think that's something really strong to be able to share people.
Those are great stats. Yeah. The 5 years that's a big number. It's especially in today's world, that's getting more and more distant. But I think that people that have been around a while, they're more settled and less likely to move on versus somebody that's been there in that 6 to 18 month range is a feel. And so I think that's our new challenge is the people that have been around a while. That's great, but how do you get the next version of that? I'd be curious on your thoughts on what you think you need to do to get that lasting impression.
You're spot on as well. Our highest turnover is in that realm, and it's also usually the younger generation as well, right? And I think that's normal for every industry, right? People don't know where they want to be; they're just out of college and they turn over high. But that's where inclusion comes in, and that's what when we started the conversation, we're still trying to tackle. So is it team meetings? Is it being creative? Is it getting people to use their brains and feel that they have a voice? And I think when you're young, a lot of times you don't feel like you have a voice. But if you can actually give it and mean it, then I think there's something there. And we're still working on it. And even me saying it out loud right now has got me thinking of some ideas that maybe I want to start instituting. But I think it is about getting that team atmosphere, get people using their brains and feeling like they have a voice. I think if you can do that, you'll get people to stay.
Yeah, love it. Love it. All right, Tyler, talk to me about, so your role as president with Basis. What do you see, let's get techie for a minute. What do you see over the next, 1 to 2 years as big changes, big opportunities in the marketing world and I'll say automation from your perspective?
Yeah, so for me and where we're focused is a couple different areas. One, I've had a huge passion on international. You heard me talk about it earlier. And I think this world is going to continue to get smaller. And so I think we need to, as a company, as a business, understand how do we attack the international community from an automation standpoint, right? It's difficult, right? Because you have so many different currencies, different time zones, all those pieces that play into all those reporting, optimization, and billing aspects. But that's one piece of it. When I look at the techie side of it and where this is going, I'm praying there's more consolidation. Because if we continue to have all of these point solutions, now we've got all the retail media networks, right? And it just becomes more and more walled gardens. It becomes very difficult to scale. And that's tough on this industry. And so where we focus is how do we bring those pieces together? Now, it's one thing to pull it all in one place, which I think we've done a good job at with data visualization tools, whether it's Datorama, Tableau, Google Sheets, whatever it is. But I also think, is there any mechanism to push in so people can actually make real-time changes? One of the aspects that I was about to bring up earlier when we talk about optimization or talking about strategy. Strategy is great, but we're about to come into the NFL season, right? You could have the best draft of anybody. You will lose if you don't change your lineup throughout the season. And I think that's true with digital advertising. People care about performance. They might say, oh, we're branding. They're going to care about performance. And so how are we looking at performance? Data is going to be a very big piece of the conversation as we move forward, whether that's through the cookieless world, although Google obviously pushed it to 2024 now, so we don't have to worry about it just yet. But I do think making sure you're hitting the right person the right time in the right content is still key. And as I look at companies that we can partner with or acquire, one of the big aspects is how do we achieve those three things, right? And I do think there are some really smart data companies out there. There's a lot of interesting new technology in the retargeting space that I think will help within the cookieless world. And then how do you make sure that you're being able to follow somebody throughout these walled gardens? And it's not easy, but I think that if I look at the future for us, it's definitely data, audience, international, and then performance. Those are the three things that I really focus on. If I can create better performance and continue to expand our audience and client base, that's where my head is at.
Yeah, I agree with all those areas. I think I'll pin on the data point. I think using the future of marketing is all about data. And the more we can, and I would challenge a lot of agencies, I think, only look backwards. They're looking in the rearview mirror with data. We're trying to look into the future as much as possible with data and create those efficiencies. Yeah, you're willing to pay a little bit more for a conversion as long as you know it's a quality one. There's a lot of bad conversions happening because we're using historical data as opposed to trying to anyway. So I think data is a huge point, and automation, it's still relatively young. Like it's in our space, like it's not perfect. It requires smart strategists to nudge, back into the right areas. And so I think as those things get better and better, the tools, the AI, whatever, it's going to just get more and more powerful, but it's still going to require some really good captains of the ship to make it as impactful to each client as possible.
Completely agree. And I hope it's always a people business, right? This is not something we want bots just running. I think there's that low level activity I talked about earlier that can be automated, but we still need the strategy. We need the smart people pulling the levers and saying what to do. And with the fragmentation, and then one other piece that I didn't touch on when I'm thinking about right now is CTV and the movement from linear into more of a digital focused based execution. And now with Netflix, with their announcement, we're in conversations with them, making sure that we've got access to all of that inventory, because I do believe video still is so powerful, right? It's the touch, feel, sound, right? Everything is there. And I think as marketers, now we have the ability to actually target a video asset at scale. That's really powerful. So that's another area that we're focusing a lot on.
Love it. Video, it's still the future. It's so underutilized by most clients today. But I always tell people, you're scrolling through any social platform, content, a piece of written word, you just keep going. A picture, there's a slow pause. A video, you stop. And so, that's going to become more noisy when more people are doing it. But right now, it's a huge opportunity. And there'll be video plus something else in the future that makes people pause or stay longer. But you're right. The Netflix thing is a huge. Think of the amount of inventory that didn't exist today that will be there tomorrow. And, automation in vehicles, the driverless cars, there's going to be the amount of inventory created in the next 5 to 10 years for what you do and what we do is just gonna it's a very, very big number. And so
Right.
I think all of us, we don't realize the attack that's coming on our personal time to be marketed to more, which is why I think even as a consumer, we want more targeted ads. We don't want all the noise because it is just that versus is there value, which is truly what we should be bringing to the consumer, whoever's making that buying decision. And so that's the exciting part with data is getting more pinpointed, making the interaction valuable as opposed to just a piece of noise that that person is just annoyed with.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, right? It's right ad, right place. That's what we got
Yeah.
to the right
It's
person.
exciting times, right?
It is. It is.
We're in a unique time. I think, the marketing books will be written and there's going to be some multiple chapters of now and the next probably 5 to 10 years that are going to be pretty significant for the history of marketing in the broad scheme of things.
Right. I agree. And so I've been talking a lot about us. When you guys focus on it, Mark, like how are you guys attacking the strategy aspect of it, right? Like where do you see the future?
Yeah, so I think the people component is huge. We want not just, butts and seats mentality like a lot of agencies have. We're really focused on bringing in A players or people who have A player potential that we can grow into that. And then it is not just doing the normal, not just using Google the way that everybody uses it, not just using the platforms that everybody, the way they use it. I think combining first party data with third party data is something that is going to be required because the platforms are kind of locking a lot of that stuff down. So I've asked you a lot of those questions of, what data points can we marry together to get a more precise, target on our audiences. That's the stuff that we're thinking a lot about. We're investing heavily in that data and analytics team, continuing to kind of build and find some really, really talented individuals. Some of the stuff I hear them talking about, I don't understand it, but I'm like, I don't know what the hell that meant, but it sounded really cool. You tell me how to explain that to a client, and I'll make it happen. So those are the exciting things. Like talent obviously is going to just continue to be that challenge, but I feel like we're in a good position there too, with what we've done just historically, and then even the way that we're acquiring new talent. I should say acquiring, how we're attracting new talent, and getting them to stay. Consolidation is obviously going to continue to happen in our space. I still think there's advantages to all of those things though. If we're going to maybe just get very focused on right now, I think the last 5 to 10 years for most agencies have been easy. It's been easy to look good as an agency because the economy's been good. You put money into the Google slot machine, and most of the time you're going to get some small green numbers that come back that the client thinks were good. I know for us, we were outperforming okay and crushing results. So we're going to attack this next couple of years with a little bit of pullback, we'll say, whatever this is going to be. Let's go and audit and just tell clients, here's where you're at, good and bad. And I'm guessing in a lot of those situations, there's going to be a lot of opportunities we'll uncover that will make them go, I didn't know it could have been better. And so the next few years, it's going to be about efficiencies and ROI on spend, the ROAS. So we need to help show some existing clients and potential clients, here's the opportunities that we're seeing and what you maybe should focus on for right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think performance is going to be key, right? There's no doubt that's how we're all going to either make it or break it. But I'm also curious from your standpoint, from your client base, are you feeling a recession coming? Are you seeing a marketing pullback? I always tell marketers, recession is the best time to advertise because
yes,
you can break through the noise, but it doesn't always fall on the right ears.
No, great question. And I know you and I have talked about this recently. So far, there's been a lot of conversations about what if, but nobody's pulled back, which I think is positive. In a lot of industry contacts, that's been the common theme. Nobody's pulling back. I think, to me, this feels a little manufactured to date. There's just a lot of scare tactics, but, like you said, unemployment's really low. A lot of our clients are actually performing very, very well. And so everybody's kind of doing that whole check, like everything seems okay, but it doesn't seem like it's supposed to be, but it is. And so the other weird component, I think, that the timing of all this, most businesses had the best 2 years they've ever had. And their mentality heading into 22 was, we're going to have our next best year ever. Like they're going to beat the last 2 years. That was probably a little unrealistic to keep that crazy of growth going. I know I suffered from that a little bit of thinking we could just keep, on this huge growth trajectory, and had a little bit of a reality check of, okay, it's still growth, which I should be very happy with. It just feels different. Now, the crazy thing that's about to come is this double bubble that could potentially happen with the baby boomers, with a mass exodus from the workforce that's going to start to roll off very rapidly, and then all of their businesses that they're going to sell. And so there's this weird recession potentially, plus the baby boomer exiting the workforce and selling businesses. Are there buyers for theirs? Are there going to be gaps in the market in general? So those are all things that you and I can't control, but we need to just be prepared for some of the crazy is going to happen. We just don't know what exactly it looks like at this point.
Yeah, I agree. And I actually just did an exercise with actually every single seller where we went through and said, how do you see the rest of this year? What are your clients saying? And you're spot on, right? Everyone's still saying, I think we're going to be good this year. We're still going to spend, even though our numbers are suggesting that there is a pullback a bit, and there's some people pushing dollars, which they may spend or they may continue to push, right? I think we're going to see that. But yeah, my fear isn't really 2022. It's definitely 2023. And I'm kind of with you. Like, I don't exactly know where it's going to be, but I think something's going to hit, whether it's the inflation, whether it's the war, whether it's, hey, there could be famine across, a lot of different parts of this world. And when that all hits, like, the global economy will affect our economy. And so how do we make sure that we're in line? But I just was in New York City, as we were talking about. I will tell you the prices have not dropped at all, and every place was packed. So, people are still spending. So I think as long as people are spending, I think there's definitely reason to be out there in the public and making sure you're marketing yourself to the right person.
Right. And you are right. Recessions are, and we've been having some of these conversations too, even if there is whatever is going to happen, it doesn't mean you shut down advertising. This is an opportunity to gain market share, to be the winner on the other side of this. It's a trough. We're maybe not at the bottom of the trough just yet, but we also can't see on the other side of it yet. But what you and I both know, from you've been in 17 years in this role alone, you've been in the ad space for 20 plus, I have as well. We know that those troughs come back up. And so position yourself to be successful, invest now to gain those, rewards basically when things start to pick back up, because that's where consumers are going to go, is who they're going to recognize. And so a lot of people pull back. You can invest now, get that market share and brand awareness way up. I know I'm preaching to the choir with you, but that's the opportunity that a lot of people have right now.
Well, I would even say to companies in our space, our best years were after recessions, which is pretty crazy to think, but those have always been our best time. I think because we just stayed focused. We had the culture in place that we didn't lose people, and we came out really strong on the other side. 2009 was a great year for us, right? So 2008 was not. But, it's just, I think if you have that mentality, you have a good culture where people feel safe. And getting back to kind of the point of this podcast, I think that really means a lot. And gaining that trust of your employee. I remember in the pandemic, we pulled back salaries. And it was based on how much you made, and there was different reasons for why we pulled different things back, but we did. And this is where we probably didn't fill in the blank space enough, because some people are like, oh, you're just doing it to cut our wages long term. We're like, listen, if we hit our numbers, we'll give everything back. And we did. And I think that trust, and when you have that and you're like, wow, they actually not only gave me all the money that I was supposed to get, but I actually got a bonus on top of it. Like, now we're gaining that trust. So if there is another hit, if there is a recession, if there's something bad, people at least understand and trust that the management team really does think about our employees, and we want them to be first.
Love it. That's a great example of, building trust, not just the corporate greed. You said it in the beginning of the conversation, culture, it's everything. And, EBITDA, yes. And I know in YPO, there's a lot of talk about EBITDA and mergers and acquisitions. There's a lot of noise in that space. So it's very common in YPO. But what the buyer is as much or more interested in is the culture, and what's your retention of both clients and your team. And so the value since 2010-ish on culture from a real valuation perspective has gone way up. People want to buy companies that have strong culture. So I would just say to the audience, no matter where you're at, if you're buying, you're selling, you're merging, you're just going to keep growing, culture is going to add value not just from the EBITDA perspective either. And so, listen, Tyler, we've had a great conversation. I know you and I could talk for hours about this, which is great. Thank you so much for being on. And any parting words that you would like to bestow upon the audience?
No, when I would thank you very much for having me on. It's definitely a privilege. So I appreciate you, Mark, for taking this leap. And then, I think for everybody else, I think we covered it off. But putting your people first, really focus on your performance for your clients. You do those two things, you can have a really successful business, and
awesome.
Just keep moving.
Well, thanks for being. Basis is a great partner. I'll throw that out there. So thank you guys for being a great company. I love that you've got a great culture. We really focus on partnering with, our partners that have great culture and core values. That's pivotal to us as well. So again, thank you for being on. It was a great conversation and can't thank you enough, and hope to see you in person soon. And we'll call it a show from there.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark.
The conversation we just had with Tyler was amazing. There's two things that jumped out to me. One, in the beginning of the conversation, Tyler talked about how Sean wrote their manifesto pretty much day one, like before they started. And that's withstood the test of time. I think that's remarkable. It's very different than the way that SpinnyTech started. We didn't do any of that for many years, but it just really shows how passionate Sean and Tyler have been about that for Basis. And so that just really jumped out to me as a really big thing. The second thing that really jumped out to me was how Tyler was really more focused on the culture than EBITDA. And obviously he cares about EBITDA a lot and the financial performance, but he recognizes without a strong culture and core values, the financial performance isn't going to happen, because if you don't have a solid culture with team members that are engaged and happy and are passionate about what they're doing, it's just the financial part's you're going to be chasing that all the time. So it's awesome to see a leader of a team of over 1,000 team members be that passionate and understand that is the big thing. You've got to invest in that. And you can see the wheels spinning as he's talking about how passionate he is about that, and that he thinks about it a lot. And so those are two things for me that stuck out. I hope they were valuable to you, and you can take those and apply them in your own world as well somehow. So a great message, I think, for our team that I'll take back to SpinnyTech is inclusion, is making sure that everybody is engaged, everybody has the opportunity to get together. The focus on that and how I think Tyler was spot on, that is the missing puzzle piece to a lot of cultures right now. And it's something I know we've been focusing a lot on, is getting people together, getting people involved. And you've got, for us, 165 different personalities of what that looks like. They've got over 1,000, so that's a bigger challenge for them. But he's spot on that is and needs to be a focus point for a lot of people, of bringing people together, getting them connected, whether that's virtually or in person, it doesn't matter, but just focusing on that. So that's something I think that I can certainly apply to the SpinnyTech team. I really appreciate that Tyler acknowledged that none of us have it figured out. When he was talking about his journey with YPO, we're at the top, we're CEOs, we're presidents, we're leaders, and you're in a room of others that are in those same situations. You kind of realize that none of us have it figured out. Nobody's perfect. As I said, we all put our pants on the same way. And that's hard for a lot of leaders to recognize and say out loud, whether you're in the C-suite or just lead a team. It's okay to be human, I think, is my translation of what he said. And as leaders, we need to own that and not be afraid to share that we don't always have it put together. We're going to have the same problems that everybody else does. And we're navigating this just like everybody else.